Hello! My name's Gabriel John Wallace Johnson, and please don't tell my mother how much I spent on this. So about a year ago, I thought it had been a while since I made a video, so I sat down to write a script on the Death Note musical when the strangest thing happened. Instead of doing that, I made a simulator for a card game that wasn't out yet. And have spent the past year updating and maintaining that simulator. Still has been a while since I made a video though, so I guess we'll talk about that. Yes, there is a Hololive card game. You were probably already aware. It was first released a year ago in Japan and is currently on set 4. I wrote and recorded this video around the time that set released, with the idea being that I would release the video before the English release came out the following month. Clearly that didn't happen though, so I'll interject at various points explaining how the English release differs. Quick note, while I'll be using the official English images of the cards when available, I will be using English proxies of the later cards that were made by Liam of Weiss and Chill and Ashi. Regardless, this is intended to be a pretty thorough introductory video. Starting with a how to play section, then an overview of the various products, some conversations about important cards and decks, and then just listing a bunch of resources for what to do next. Also just stuff I find interesting. This will include the occasional criticism, but I do really like this game, and I hope that is clear as we continue. There are 4 kinds of cards in the game: Oshi, Holomem, Support, and Cheer. You have one Oshi card in your deck that is always available to you like a leader card. They have a name and color, both of which only matter when another card says they do, a once per turn Oshi skill, a once per game SP Oshi skill, and a life stat which determines how many Holomem you can lose before losing the game. You fill your 50 card main deck with Holomem and support cards. The Holomem are the main game pieces that will face off against each other. They have a bloom level, name, color, HP stat, and a baton pass cost. Holomem also have tags, which only matter when another card says they do. Holomem usually have a tag for their branch and generation, and many Holomem have additional descriptive tags, like singing, or art, or animal ears, or alcohol, or baby. A member usually has the exact same tags across all of their Holomem cards, with occasional one-off exceptions. Higher bloom levels are usually stronger but are harder to get out. Only Holomem with a bloom level of debut or spot can be played directly from the hand. They have at least one art, read attack, that deals damage to opponent Holomem. The art can have an effect that gets triggered when it's used, and the Holomem itself may have its own effect. There are collab and bloom effects, more on those later, and gifts, which are the wild cards. They're usually continuous effects, but some are additional actions you can take. Just read the card, it'll tell you what to do. Supports are cards that, depending on the subtype, are either played directly from your hand for an immediate effect, or attached to one of your Holomem for a usually lingering effect. A support card can also be limited, and you can only use one limited support card per turn. You fill your 20 card cheer deck with cheer cards. These have a color, and that's it. They get attached to your Holomem to allow them to use their arts. 2 quick notes about the names. Technically, the Oshi cards are Oshi Holomem cards, but this can cause confusion, and you need to specify that they are not a special kind of Holomem card. Also, saying Oshi is just quicker. The Japanese name for cheer is Yell, which is used similarly in Japanese. Think of Team Yell from Pokemon Sword and Shield. Machine translation will frequently call it Ale or Eru. Each player needs a 50-card main deck comprised of Holomem and support cards, a 20-card cheer deck, and an Oshi card. Yes, those numbers are exact. You cannot go above or below 50 cards in a deck. There are no further deck building restrictions. For reasons we'll get into, you need at least one debut Holomem in your main deck, but this is not a hard rule for some reason. You will also need a set of damage counters, at least one 6-sided die, and something to mark when you've used your SP skill. There are official counters, but those aren't necessary. You win the game in one of 3, technically 4 ways. The main way is to reduce your opponent's life to 0 by downing their Holomem. Each Holomem knocked out corresponds to, usually, 1 life reduced. You could also win by downing all of your opponent's Holomem, leaving them with an empty stage. You can win by your opponent decking out. If they go to draw for turn with an empty deck, they lose. Note that they don't lose for trying to draw by effect with an empty deck, only when drawing for turn. I'll get to the 4th one in a little bit, but it's not something you have any control over. Both players have a field that looks like this. Your shuffled main deck will go here, your shuffled cheer deck will go here, and your Oshi will go here. Please note once again that, despite what the playmat is saying, the Oshi does not count as a Holomem card. Your life will eventually be represented here with face-down cheer cards. 4 cheer in this area corresponds to 4 life remaining, for example. Your archive, this game's discard pile, is here. Downed Holomem and played support cards will all go here face up. We say that cards get archived when they're sent here. Your Holo Power goes here. That's a resource used for your Oshi skills, all to be explained later. The remaining spots are for your Holomem cards, and are collectively called your stage. The center position is the main active spot for your Holomem to perform in, with the collab position being a secondary spot that Holomem can go into temporarily. The rest of the stage is called the back position, but most people call it the backstage. To demonstrate how to actually play the game, we will walk through a sample game I played with my buddy Jimmy. Sorry for the bad crop, I couldn't get a better angle with my rig. Both players shuffle both of their decks and place their Oshi face down. We forgot to do that last part, but with the magic of editing, no we didn't. Randomly determine who goes first. Then, both players draw 7 cards for their starting hands, we'll get back to mulligans, place a debut Holomem face down in the center position, and then place up to 5 debut or spot Holomem face down backstage. Note that you cannot put a spot Holomem in the center position at this time. When both players are ready, all face-down cards get flipped face up. Then each player looks at the life value of their Oshi and puts that many cheer from the top of the cheer deck into life face down without looking. Both of our Oshis have 5 life, so we both put 5 cheer down. This represents the main win condition of the game. If our life goes to 0, all of these cheer get taken out of this area, we lose. Then the game begins with the first player's first turn. Before that, let's quickly back up to drawing that starting hand of 7. Both players get a free mulligan where they can shuffle their hand back into the main deck and draw a new hand of 7, no questions asked. But that's not the end of the mulligans. You need a debut Holomem in your starting hand in order to proceed with setup. So if, after your free mulligan, your hand of 7 doesn't have any debuts, you must do a forced mulligan. You reveal your hand to your opponent, shuffle your hand into the deck, and then draw 6 cards. If that hand doesn't have any debuts, you do another forced mulligan, drawing 5 cards. If that still doesn't have debuts, you go down to 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. If that single card isn't a debut, you lose before the game even starts. This is the fourth method of victory I alluded to earlier. Also, because people ask, if your initial hand doesn't have any debuts, your free mulligan is forced, but acts exactly like the free mulligan normally does. You still draw 7 cards, you don't reveal your hand, you don't even have to say that it's forced. There's no great way to order this, but I do need to say ahead of time that holomem can get rested, denoted by turning them horizontal, and certain actions cannot be done with rested holomem. I'll give a full explanation later. Back to the start of the game. Every turn has 6 phases, but 2 of them don't happen on the first player's first turn, so we skip the reset phase straight into the draw phase. The turn player draws a card from the main deck. Yes, even on the first turn. If the deck is empty when this phase comes around, the turn player loses to deck out. Also, there is no max hand size. Go crazy. Then we move to the cheer phase, where the turn player reveals the top card of their cheer deck and attaches it to any of their holomem in any position. You can't see it that well in the footage, but I reveal a yellow cheer and attach it to my center Sakura Miko. If the cheer deck is empty, this phase is skipped. There is no penalty. The main phase is the main phase of the turn, where most things happen. There are 6 actions you can take as many times as you like, except the ones that are explicitly once per turn, in any order during the main phase, though one of them isn't available during either player's first turn. First, the turn player can play debut and spot holomem directly from their hand to the backstage. They can do this as many times as they like, though there can only be up to 6 holomem on the stage at once. If there are already 6 holomem on stage, you cannot play a new one. The backstage is not limited in capacity, and you can nichely get all 6 holomem in the back. I do not have any debuts or spots in hand, so I don't do that. An interesting note is that there is no difference between holomem played to the back during your first turn and holomem played to the back during the preliminary phase. There are reasons why you might want to wait to play to the back, but I'm not well versed enough to explain them well. Second, the turn player can play support cards. If the support subtype is staff, item, or event, the card can be played directly from the hand for an automatic effect. Drawing cards, dealing damage, searching the deck, stuff like that. These subtypes can be limited, and you can only play 1 limited card per turn. Yes, the phrasing on the card is weird. No, you cannot play 2 different limited cards on the same turn. This is uncontroversial, they just said it wrong. Don't worry though, the English translation's worse. The first player cannot play a limited support on their first turn. If the support subtype is tool, mascot, or fan, the card is instead attached to a holomem. Tools and mascots can be attached to any holomem. Once attached, they usually provide a generic effect to the attached holomem and then a bonus, frequently more important, effect based on certain criteria of that holomem. Tools have a variety of criteria that can be checked, but mascots usually check the holomem's name. Holomem can only have up to 1 tool and 1 mascot attached at a time. Fans, on the other hand, can only be attached to holomem of the correct name or names, but you can attach as many copies as you like. I have 4 support cards in hand. 2 of them are limited, so I cannot play them just yet. And the other 2 are Elfriend, which is Flair's fan. So I attach both to the same Flair in the backstage. Elfriend gives Flair an extra 10 HP, so 2 of them give an extra 20. As in, this Flair in the back actually has 70 HP instead of the listed 50. An extra 20 HP isn't a lot, but especially on a low HP debut, it can make a real difference. Third, the turn player can collab by moving a holomem from the back into the collab position, assuming it's empty, and putting the top card of their main deck into holo power face down without looking. If that holomem has a collab effect, it is triggered after the movement and the holo power increase. If your main deck is empty, you cannot collab. A resting holomem cannot collab. You can only collab once per turn. If you have a Holomem in the collab position, you can perform, read attack, twice in a turn, but you also open up a second Holomem to getting downed. This is the only way to accumulate holo power right now. In this turn, I collab with my Flare. Her collab effect allows me to search my deck for an appropriately named debut and place it on the backstage. This deck has several members in it, but Flare is the only one with cards of higher bloom levels. As such, I'd like to get more than one, but this effect can only grab the others. I grab this Shirogane Null card, whose collab effect can buff the center Holomem's power by 10. An extra 10 power isn't a lot, but any little bit helps, as we will see later. Fourth, the turn player can use their Oshi skills. Every Oshi has a once per turn Oshi skill and a once per game SP Oshi skill. Both skills have a cost associated with them. To use one of these skills, all you have to do is declare that you're using it, look at the associated cost, and then archive that many cards from the top of your holo power. You can use both your Oshi skill and SP Oshi skill in the same turn if you have enough holo power. Some skills can't be used during the main phase, having different activation timing. The skill will explicitly say when this is the case. Also, some skills can have a cost of X, and you decide the value of X when you declare that you're using the skill. You may want to use an SP marker to keep track of if you have used your SP Oshi skill already. My SP Oshi skill only costs 1 holo power, so I could use it right now, but its effect to switch the positions of Holomem and heal one of them isn't relevant right now, so I choose not to. Fifth, the turn player can baton pass. By looking at the baton pass cost of their center Holomem, archiving that many cheer from their center Holomem, and then switching their center Holomem with one of their back Holomem. You can only baton pass once per turn. The collab Holomem may not baton pass. Some Holomem have no baton pass cost and can switch without archiving any cheer. You cannot baton pass if your center Holomem is resting, and you cannot switch with a resting Holomem. I do not baton pass this turn. I will eventually in this game, and that is unusual. It is actually pretty rare that someone baton passes in a game. The sixth possible action is blooming, which we'll get back to shortly, but it is how you play your first and second bloom Holomem. Also, some effects may require you to activate them during the main phase. That doesn't fall into any of these categories, but the rules are the same. Do this in any order relative to the other actions. After the main phase is the performance phase, skipped for the first player's first turn. Finally is the end phase, where all effects that say until end of turn, this turn, or the like expire. If your center position is empty, you must pick a back Holomem that isn't resting to move to the center. If all of your back Holomem are resting, you must pick one of those to go to the center. It remains resting. If you have no back Holomem, you continue with the center position empty. Then, the turn passes to the opposing player. For the second player's first turn, we once again skip the reset phase. The draw phase and cheer phase proceed as before, with Jimmy attaching a blue cheer to his center Okayu. And the only difference to the main phase is that the turn player may now play a limited support card. Jimmy does, playing So You're the Enemy, swapping my center Holomem with that debut Null in the back. I presume Jimmy correctly deduced that I'm planning on making good use of this Null and wants to knock it out quickly. But the main difference from this turn on is that we do the performance phase. Each of your center and collab Holomem can declare an art to perform, targeting your opponent's center or collab Holomem. These arts can be declared in any order, but each Holomem and position can only declare one art. A rested Holomem cannot perform. With that being said, let's discuss combat, starting with the anatomy of an art. Every art has a name, a cheer cost, and a base damage. Some arts have an effect, and some have a critical hit. The cheer cost refers to the color and quantity of cheer that must be attached to the performing holomem to declare this art. Colorless cheer means that cheer of any color will suffice. Note that this cheer does not get archived or expended in any way in the process of performing an art. It is simply a requirement. The base damage is the base amount of damage that the art will deal to the target holomem. And the critical hit means that this art does the stated amount of extra damage to a target holomem of the appropriate color. The effect is an effect that triggers when you use the art, happening before damage is dealt. However, any knock-on effects happen after the damage is dealt. So any effects that trigger off of the actions that occur while resolving an artifact will only happen after the damage of that art is dealt. This is because the game uses a check timing system similar to YuYuTei, but the details are beyond the scope of this quick explanation. So, your holomem has the proper cheer attached, they declare a target and deal damage. Place damage counters on the target to represent this. If that damage meets or exceeds the total health plus any extra health of the target holomem, then that holomem is downed. That holomem and all attached cards get archived. If that was the last holomem on stage, that holomem's player loses to an empty stage. Otherwise, that player takes a cheer from their life and attaches it to any of their holomem. If that was their last life, they lose to having no life. There are special holomem called Buzz that will lose you 2 life when downed instead of 1. In that case, you just reveal and attach 1 cheer and then the next. Note that, unlike Pokemon, the player does not immediately push a holomem to the center if it is empty. Your center and collab holomem can perform in any order, or you can choose to have one or both not perform, even if they are able. Jimmy uses Okayu's art, Mogu Mogu Okayu, dealing 30 damage to my knoll. After that, the performance phase ends, we go to the end phase, and then pass the turn. The first player's second turn, and on, all act the exact same way. We start with the reset phase. First, all rested holomem get unrested. Then, if you have a collab holomem, that holomem moves to the back and rests. Then, if you have no center holomem, you move a back holomem that is not rested to the center position. If you only have rested holomem, you move one of those to the center position. Let's finally explain what resting is. As we just saw, a collab holomem goes to the back and rests during the reset phase. This is the only way a holomem gets rested. A rested holomem is turned horizontal and cannot collab, perform, baton pass, or be switched with a baton pass. They are also deprioritized for being moved to the center when it's empty. The most important one there, though, is that they can't collab, stopping you from collabing with the same holomem turn after turn. They unrest during the next reset phase, and this is the only way a holomem gets unrested. Then the draw phase and cheer phase are the same. The main phase is mostly the same, but now you can bloom holomem. First and second bloom holomem cannot be played directly from the hand. They must be played on top of another holomem. This is called blooming. The rules of blooming are as follows. The holomem already on the stage must not have been played this turn or already bloomed this turn, and the holomem in hand must have the same name as the stage holomem, be a first or second bloom, be a bloom level at most one above the stage holomem, and have more HP than damage currently on the stage holomem. Then, you play the holomem in hand on top of the stage holomem, transferring damage and attached cards. If the new Holomem has a bloom effect, it occurs now. To be clear, you cannot bloom a Holomem the turn it's played. You cannot bloom a Holomem twice in one turn. You can bloom a debut to first to first, a first to second, and a second to second. You cannot bloom a debut to second. You cannot bloom anything to debut. You cannot bloom a spot to anything or anything to spot. The Holomem must share a name. You can bloom in any position. You can bloom a rested Holomem, and the new Holomem will also be rested. You cannot bloom a Holomem that has more damage than the new Holomem has HP. Note that this does not account for extra HP the Holomem may have. So 100 HP Holomem with 10 extra HP and 100 damage cannot bloom into another Holomem with 100 HP. Yes, that part's weird. I use a limited support card that checks the top 4 cards of my deck and lets me reveal as many Holomem of the appropriate name from those 4 and add them to my hand. I find 2 debut flares and a first bloom flare. The remaining card goes on the bottom of the deck. I play one of those debut flares to my backstage and bloom my resting flare to a vanilla first bloom. I'm just building up my flares so that I can quickly get to the strong attackers in my deck. Then I collab with my backstage Miko, whose collab effect deals 10 damage to Jimmy's center Okayu. Then the performance and end phases go as before. I use both Noel's and Miko's arts, doing 40 damage overall to Jimmy's Okayu. Keep doing this until one of the 3 previously mentioned win conditions happens. Jimmy puts a blue cheer on his spot Laplace, blooms his center Okayu, and plays a limited support that shuffles his hand into the deck and draws 5. Then he plays a new debut Okayu in the back and collabs with it. Her collab effect is weird, and it ended up not doing anything, so I won't go into detail. Also, we only realized late into the game that Jimmy thought that only Holomem with collab effects can collab. That is not true, and he makes a few suboptimal plays as a result of this misunderstanding. Oops. He uses his center Okayu's art Nekokaburi to deal 30 damage to my Noel. Note that he cannot use the second art or perform with the collab Okayu because he does not have the cheer for it. In my reset phase, my back flare unrests and my collab Miko goes to the back and rests. I put a yellow cheer on my first bloom flare, play that same limited support again, revealing another debut Noel and first bloom flare, putting the remaining cards on the bottom of my deck in an order of my choosing. I bloom my debut flare into a first bloom, and I make a rules mistake here. This first bloom flare has an effect to search the deck for an L friend, the Flare Fan. This is mandatory, but I know that I only have 2 copies of L friend, and they're already on the field, so I don't bother. Thing is, though, it would still shuffle the deck, and the limited supports I've been playing have stacked the deck a little, so it does matter. I will not notice during the game. Anyway, I baton pass, archiving a cheer from my center Noel and switching it with my vanilla first bloom flare. I lose a cheer for baton passing, but that Noel is doing nothing for me in the center position and is just going to get knocked out anyway. Thankfully, I just found another copy, so I collab with that, giving my center flare an extra 10 power so I can deal 40 damage to Jimmy's center Okayu. Jimmy attaches a blue cheer to his center Okayu, plays a new debut Okayu to the back, and collabs with it. Her collab effect deals 10 damage to my center flare and my damaged back Noel, downing it. However, this effect specifically says that Holomem downed by that damage don't reduce life, so I stay at 5 life. Then he uses his center Okayu's art Sha, whose effect allows Jimmy to archive a blue cheer from her to deal 10 damage to my center flare and my back Polka before dealing the 40 arts damage to my center flare. I attach another yellow cheer to my center flare and play a limited support that draws me 3 cards. Then I collab with my back Miko, dealing 10 damage to his center Okayu, and use my center Flare's art Tea Time with You, doing enough damage to down Jimmy's center Okayu. That Holomem and all attached cards get archived, and Jimmy takes a blue cheer from life, attaching it to his collab Okayu. Then I use Miko's art to deal 20 damage to his collab Okayu. During Jimmy's reset phase, he has to choose a non-rested Holomem to go to the center, and he chooses his Okayu, whom he attaches a blue cheer to. Jimmy plays his own version of the limited support that looks at the top 4 cards, revealing a debut Okayu and a first bloom Okayu. He blooms his center Okayu into a first bloom with a bloom effect that attaches a cheer from archive to a Holomem with the gamer's tag, attaching a blue cheer to that center Okayu. Jimmy uses his Oshi skill, archiving 2 cards from the top of Holo Power to buff his center Okayu's power by 20, so he can deal 40 damage to my center Flare. I do something I think is cute on this turn. I attach a yellow cheer to my back first bloom Flare, play a debut Suisei to the back, and collab with it. Her collab effect lets me attach a cheer from archive to any of my other Holomem. I attach a yellow cheer from archive to my back first bloom Flare, and then bloom her to an idle first bloom Flare, whose bloom effect lets her switch positions with my collab Suisei. Then I use my Oshi skill to buff my center Flare's power by 20. Thus, 70 damage from my center plus 40 damage from my collab does exactly 110 damage, downing Jimmy's center Okayu. Jimmy attaches a blue cheer from life to his back spot LaPlus. Jimmy moves his Okayu to the center and attaches a blue cheer to it. Then he uses a limited support that archives a cheer on stage to search for a non-buzz first or second bloom Holomem from deck. He grabs a second Okayu. Interesting note about cards like this though. Unlike a game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, it is not illegal to activate cards like this without having any valid targets in the deck. You can simply fail to find a valid target. If it grabs multiple things, you can grab as much as possible and continue like normal. More interestingly though, you can lie. You can claim that you didn't find a target even if there is a valid target in the deck. Even if for whatever reason the opponent knows there is a valid target. Note that this only works for effects that look for cards with some property from a hidden zone. So effects that grab any card or grab a target from a public zone like the archive won't allow you to lie. Anyway, Jimmy plays 2 debut Okayus to the back and collabs with 1, dealing 10 damage to my center Flare and my back Miko. Then he pays 1 Holo Power to use Okayu's SP Oshi skill, dealing another 50 damage to my back Miko, downing it. This effect does not say it doesn't reduce life, so I take a yellow cheer from my life and attach it to my back Knoll. We forgot to flip his SP marker, but magic of editing. Then he blooms his center Okayu and uses her art to deal 30 damage to my center Flare. I attach a yellow cheer to my center Flare and play that limited support that shuffles my hand in the deck and draws 5. I pay 1 Holo Power to use Flare's SP Oshi skill that switches my center Flare with my back Polka and heals the Flare by 30. And then I pass. Yeah, this wasn't a great turn, but I really didn't want to lose my Flare. Maybe there were better plays. Jimmy attaches a blue cheer to his center Okayu, plays a spot Carbonated to the back, and collabs with it. Her collab effect lets him search for a fan or mascot from the deck. He searches the mascot Okanyan and attaches it to his center Okayu. Okanyan has 2 effects, but the main one is to reduce all incoming damage by 10. He then blooms that center Okayu to a second bloom, who deals 60 damage to my Polka, downing her. I reveal a yellow cheer from life and attach it to my idle first bloom. I move my idle first bloom Flare to the center and attach a yellow cheer to my back Suisei. I play that top 4 limited support again, revealing a Buzz First Bloom Flare and a debut Flare. Real talk, I'm looking for the second bloom. I have 2 copies in my deck and no way to tutor them. I bloom the back Flare to the Buzz First Bloom and play a non-limited support that checks the top 5 cards of the deck for a limited support and puts the rest on the bottom of the deck. I'm hoping for some draw power that could find the second bloom. I've got a draw 3 in hand, but getting some extra options can't hurt. Except for the fact that I find the second bloom in the top 5. So I have to put it on the bottom of the deck. Uh-oh. Well, at least there's the other copy somewhere. Also, I don't find any limited supports. Anyway, I collab with the Buzz Flare and use my Oshi skill. And notice that one of the cards I archived from Holopower is the other second bloom. I have no way of getting Holomem out of the archive, so my only remaining copy of the second bloom is on the bottom of the deck. Uh-oh! Anyway, my center flare does 50 damage and my buzz flare does 40 damage to the center Okayu. Jimmy attaches a blue cheer to a center Okayu and my camera stopped recording without telling me. I will get it back on, but we lose a few turns. I'm recording and editing this a couple weeks after actually playing the game, so I kind of need to reconstruct things. I think Jimmy used a pen light to archive a Holopower and attach a blue cheer to a center Okayu, then collabed with his effect debut Okayu that dealt 10 damage to my center flare and back Suisei. He blooms the collab Okayu just so it has more health. Then he used second Okayu's art Okayu without archiving any cheer to do 100 more damage to my center flare. On my turn, I attach a yellow cheer to my back knoll, because it did not matter, play a debut flare to back, and okay, so I remember being a little proud of seeing this. As it stands, I am short of dealing the required 80 damage to the second bloom Okayu by just 10. I eventually realize, though, that I have a vanilla first bloom flare in hand whose attack has a base damage of 50 instead of 40. So, I bloom my center flare to that, collab with Knoll, and use my Oshi skill. 70 damage from center and 10 from collab is just enough to down the second bloom Okayu. I also probably used the draw 3 at some point. Jimmy attaches the life cheer to his unlimited debut Okayu, puts it in the center, and then attaches the turn cheer to the rested Okayu in the back. Collabs with the Spot Laplace, and uses his Oshi skill to deal 70 damage to my center flare, downing it. I attach the life cheer to my back flare, put the buzz in the center, attach the turn cheer to the back flare, bloom that back flare into another copy of the vanilla first bloom, collab with it, and attack with both, dealing just enough damage to knock out the center Okayu. The life cheer is attached to the back Okayu. The camera turns back on, and it looks grim for Jimmy, but it should be noted that I am also on the precipice. If my already damaged buzz is downed, I will lose 2 life and lose the game. Unfortunately, the game soon ends rather anticlimactically, when I inform Jimmy that I can win by knocking out his 70 HP Spot instead of his 250 HP buzz. We discuss for a bit about how things would have shaken out if he hadn't collabed, and it is rather close. My running plan was to use Mane-chan to try to get that second bloom. Not great odds of succeeding, but genuinely my only option. If I get it, it's still not a guaranteed win. It probably only gets 1 attack off before being downed, but the game is in my favor. If not, I have to play damage control and slowly whittle through his tanky buzz, and I probably don't win that numbers war. So that's the game, but we're not done with explanations quite yet. There's a limit of 4 copies per card, except cheer and some debuts, but this isn't based off the card name like most TCGs. After all, the whole premise of the game is that you have many cards of the same name in your deck. I guess they could have done the YuYuTei thing, where every member card has an epithet or title distinctifying them, but they didn't. Instead, the 4 copies rule is based off of the card number in the bottom right. The 6 colors are white, green, red, blue, purple, and yellow, in that order. Though, set 1 only has the first 4, with set 2 adding purple and set 3 adding yellow. The only mechanical time color comes up is in determining if the advantage buff gets applied. There are no deck building restrictions with regard to color. Also, there are several special kinds of Holomem. Most common are unlimited debuts. These are debut cards that have a bit of rules text in the bottom saying that you can have as many copies of them as you like in your deck. You are not limited to the standard 4. You can have a deck of nothing but this one Bay card if you like. Not a good idea, but you can. Less common are Buzz Holomem that have better stats and effects than a Holomem of the same bloom level, but a bit of rules text in the bottom here saying that when they are downed, you lose 2 life instead of 1. That's the only distinction. They can bloom on top of an appropriately named debut or first bloom without any issues. All Buzzes right now are first blooms, and they can be bloomed into another first bloom or second bloom as normal without issue, and the new Holomem will only lose 1 life when downed, not 2. But this is where that rule about damage tends to come up. Pretty uncommon are Spot Holomem. They came up in the rules explanation, but they're essentially a bloom level outside of the standard lineup. They act like debuts, you can play them directly from your hand, but they have a special bit of rules text down here saying that they cannot bloom into anything. They are colorless, and usually have colorless cheer requirements on all their arts. Most rarely, as in there are 2, are duo Holomem that combine 2 different members onto the same card. They have 2 colors and have a special bit of rules text saying that they count as the 2 Holomem that go into them. This means that you can attach fans of either or both, that you can bloom into or out of either name, even switching names as you go, and that it counts as both names for any effects that care. For example, this Spot Koyori has a collab effect with 2 different effects depending on if it's a Sora or Ozki that it's collabing with. So, if you collab with this Koyori while you have Soraz in your center position, both effects happen in sequence. Essentially, the game is mostly Pokemon with a bunch of minor tweaks, 2 major tweaks, and the whole collab Holo Power Oshi skill loop. And I do want to commend these changes. I'm not of the opinion that Mana Flood and Mana Screw are fundamental issues with the standard sort of resource system, but it is nice to have your cheer in a separate deck where you axiomatically get 1 per turn instead of being shuffled into the main deck. Also, life being a comeback mechanic instead of a win more mechanic is one of those obvious improvements that just makes sense. Collabing adds a fun strategic layer to the game, both allowing you to attack twice and potentially get 2 knockouts, as well as building up your Holo Power to let you do your Oshi skills. But it also opens yourself up to being targeted twice and potentially getting knocked out twice. There's also an interesting strategic difference between the center and collab positions themselves. The center position is fixed and you can't easily switch out what Holomem is there, while the collab position is much more flexible, allowing you to change up your strategy on a turn-by-turn basis. That sounds like the collab position is better, but the resting mechanic, though awkwardly implemented, does stop you from putting the same strong attacker there turn after turn. It can even screw you over if your center gets downed, putting either a weak attacker to the center or a rested Holomem who can't even attack into the center. Let's start with a critique that I think is fairly uncontroversial. The mulligan system's bad. Having the ability to lose the game before it even starts is wild. It's rare if you've built your deck correctly, but it can happen. It does happen. But even without that, you're starting the game with fewer and fewer cards. At a certain point, you've basically lost anyway. Add on to that, the fact that, you're looking at fewer and fewer cards each time. If you start failing, you're more likely to keep failing, and it's just this snowball effect of failure. It's just a feel-bad mechanic all around. This was recorded later, but this is a box of set 4, Curious Universe, that I'm going to open, and in voiceover, I will talk more about the cards and booster packs. Starting with the basic units, there are 8 cards in a pack, 12 packs in a box, 12 boxes in a case, and 4 cases in a master case. There are 3 to 4 commons, 2 to 3 uncommons, and 1 rare in every pack. There's also an occasional middle slot with rares or better. Double rares are better rares and get special foil treatments. S cards are foil versions of commons or uncommons. Super rares are full art versions of rares and double rares. Ultra rares are alt arts of double rares. SY cards are alt arts of cheer. Oshi super rares are the standard printing of Oshis. Oshi ultra rares are the alt arts of Oshis. And secret rares are Oshi ultra rares, except that one time, with a stamped signature. I have thoughts about the distribution, but the only one I feel strongly about is that there should be an Oshi in every box. As it stands, boxes don't have very exciting guarantees, and a required game piece should be guaranteed at a level below buying a full case. And yes, I realize that my argument is slightly undercut by the fact that I pulled an Oshi. But look at the pretty foil! Aww, it's polar rectangles! I think it's a 50-50 whether you get an Oshi in a box or not, which is not good enough, I feel. The previous sets also had cheer in some of the packs, but set 4 did away with that. I should also mention that set 1 had a very different distribution, with no S, SR, or SY, 10 boxes in a case, and a guaranteed Oshi and ultra rare in every box. I'm not lingering on it because the English release is more like the later Japanese sets in terms of distribution. There are 12 boxes in a case, there are S and SR cards now. There are no guaranteed Oshis or ultra rares in a box. Also, English master cases have 3 cases in them instead of 4. Oshi ultra rares are still 1 per master case though. I also want to note that the cards themselves are very high quality. They're using the thickest card stock I have ever seen for a TCG. The cards feel like tiny boards in my hand. And I'm pretty sure that all of the cards have a bit of foil on the back. That does mean that all of the cards are susceptible to curling, but this doesn't appear to be a huge issue. Those are my pulls. I'm not a popping off kind of guy, but this was cool. Another interesting little tidbit from the launch of the game was this starter cheer set, which contained 20 of each color cheer that was in the game at the start. So white, green, red, and blue. Just to get you started, make sure you can make a deck of any color you like without having to find the various cheers in the packs. It also came with, I had these out separately, a starter Oshi of each color. Just that, you can throw together a deck of any color you like. These Oshis are bad. Like, it's nice that they're very cheap. The once per turn skill only costs 2. The SP skill only costs 1. All of the Oshi skills are to buff the collab position Holomem's attack by 20 if they are the appropriate color, which is underwhelming. The SP skills are different, but they are all a little underwhelming. Proudly Mume's is the best for blocking 20 damage. Is it worth the purchase? I don't know. If you're gonna open a lot of boxes or like a full case or something, you don't need it for the cheer. And again, these Oshis are bad. You're probably never gonna run them. But like, The game also has a few start decks. That's what they're called, not starter decks or trial decks or structure decks or whatever. They are called start decks here. Every start deck is playable out the box and is mostly comprised of unique cards. The Soraz start deck that launched with set 1 is very different in style and substance to the later start decks. There are 6 different one of these, 3 that launched with set 2 and 3 that launched with set 3. This one launched alongside set 3. But all of those 6 are more so in this style. Those are all very similar. I have already opened up and played with the set 1 start deck, so this won't be indicative of that. It had like the nice cardboard insert, if I recall correctly. Interestingly, it came with 2 Oshi cards, a Sora Oshi card and an Asuki Oshi card. You gotta pick which one you used. You should pick the Sora Oshi. Asuki Oshi has its uses, and is in a more competitively viable deck than Sora is right now. But, especially in terms of the start deck, the Sora Oshi is just way better. The Sora Oshi has very cheap Oshi skills. The once per turn costs 1, the SP costs 2, and these are actually pretty good effects as well. The once per turn skill moves a cheer from one holomem to another. It's quite nice, especially for only costing a single holo power. And her SP Oshi skill is a very strong finisher, forcing your opponent to swap their center with a back holomem of your choosing, and then if your center holomem is white, it gets an extra 50 power. That's a really good skill. Asuki, on the other hand, both of her skills cost 3. The once per turn is very underwhelming. It fixes 1 die roll, which, like, you can do some cool stuff with that. I don't think that's worth 3 holo power, though. Her SP Oshi skill, though, is quite nice. You can take as many cheer in your archive as you like and attach all of them to one of your green holomem. That doesn't have a lot of application in the start deck, but that is the reason she's in an actually competitively viable deck nowadays. As for the contents of the main deck, I mean, there are some very good cards here. This Sora card here got used in a lot of different decks. It's just a nice little early game power buff. The Asuki deck, when that was viable, was mostly comprised of cards from this deck. This debut IRyS shows up occasionally. Mane-chan and Nodoka are staples, more on them later. So yeah, the cards in this start deck are good. It is a strong recommendation that you purchase this deck if you are serious about playing. That being said, the deck itself, as a single constructed entity, is bad. And I don't just mean that in terms of power level, though it is a very weak deck. Every single game I have played with this deck has been, like, just not very fun after a certain point. After a certain point, both players have like 8 cards in hand and can do basically nothing. There are just way too many debuts and spots in this deck. You are flooded with them. You cannot do anything for most of the game. It's a very good tool for learning the game, but I don't think you would whip out this deck and play with it just for fun after that initial learning how the game plays. The start deck also comes with a playmat and some tokens that I have not actually opened up yet. Hold on a moment. Oh, and a quick start guide. Always forget that one. But yeah, these are the tokens and pretty good quality. Nice cardboard. Yeah, that's good quality damage counters there. The start deck does not, and this might be rectified for the English release, but in Japanese at least, it does not come with an SP marker. All the later start decks do, so that's just a weird exclusion. The set 2 and 3 starter decks are conversely, like, made much more cheaply, but are much more playable decks, for the most part. Can I open this up without tearing it? A feat I have never managed before on one of these tiny ones. Today is not the day. Okay. That is open now, and as you can see, that is very economically packed in there. Yeah, the whole deck and the tokens come in there. There is no playmat or quick start guide this time around. And these decks, I have not played with them extensively. The sample game in the how to play section is happening after I record this, so I guess I'll let you know how that went in post. Yeah, it was fun. There was still a bit of an issue of having 8 cards in hand and not being able to do anything, but only to the level of, oh, this deck and my playing could be improved, not a sort of fundamental flaw. Would recommend. But these seem like much more playable decks. They did a lot for the members that were featured in them. They gave them a lot of new support. There's a lot of just, a lot of very good reprints in here as well. Mane-chan. Ordinary PC. That's a big one that is being reprinted. I think if I recall correctly, the cards in here are not as good as you would find in a booster pack, but they're not significantly worse. They do show up in the corresponding decks. Except for, that is, the Oshi. That might look familiar to you. The Oshis in the later start decks have basically been the starter tier Oshis, but a little different. They've got 2 holo power Oshi skill, 1 holo power SP Oshi skill. The Oshi skill buffs the center holomem's power by 20, if it's the proper color. And then actually that is the exact same SP skill there. Yeah, so these Oshis aren't good. You probably also saw that in the sample game. The tokens this time around come with an SP marker. Wow! I don't know why Soraz didn't have one of those. But also, this is much flimsier cardboard. This is just way cheaper than what Soraz had. And I think that's all I have to say about them. Interjecting this from the future, the English translation is not very good. Like, it's not awful. It is, with only a few exceptions, perfectly legible. There was clearly a lot of work put into the translations, and I quite like some of the translations, actually. It's just not very disciplined. There are a lot of just needlessly wordy translations, like Circle of Hololive Listeners, or So, that makes you my enemy. And, harping on that one a bit, there's a lot of official translations that just kind of got ignored. Like Human Rabbitality Project becoming Operation Bonify Humanity. I know it's a reference, but I wouldn't think that'd be an issue. More annoying, though, is that some terms got translated that we just wouldn't. Like Zain becoming troop member and Nosagi becoming wild rabbit, even though nobody says that. Like, we're all weebs here. Nun became Noon somehow. There's some peculiar formatting. Hollow power being written lowercase h hollow space capital P power is nasty, and I want nothing to do with that. This is not as important, but it's really funny. The starter cheer set Suisei and the start deck Okayu Oshis have the same SP Oshi skill that is literally called backshot in Japanese. Obviously, they couldn't call it that in English, and calling it strike back makes sense in that it's synonyms that don't have the same sexual connotation. But I feel like if you show someone the phrase strike back, they will interpret that to mean retributive damage of some form, instead of literally a strike to the back, which is what it actually is. I'm just not very pleased with the English translation, is what I'm saying. How to stay afloat in this world and all of its gravity. All TCGs have their staple cards. Cards that are really good and go into basically every deck, but aren't like overpowered or anything like that. You know, like Pokemon has Boss's Order and Nest Ball. So it's no surprise that Hololive also has their own fair share of staples, like Boss's Order and Nest Ball. So You're the Enemy, or Jateki Dane, is a limited support that switches your opponent's center holomem with a back holomem of your choosing. An ordinary PC, or basic PC, or standard PC, or whatever the official translation will be, is a non-limited support that searches your deck for a debut holomem and plays it directly to your backstage. Enemy is a great finisher, pulling a weakened holomem to the front so you can knock it out. Note that it does work on rested holomem, unlike a baton pass. Most decks run 1 or 2 copies, which I think is weird if you're coming from Pokemon, but the damage values don't get as crazy here, so it does actually need to be weakened for it to work. You might also see Call In, which forces a back holomem into the collab position, but that's less common. Ordinary PC is a wonderful consistency tool that basically every deck runs at 3 or 4 copies, really the only exception being decks that only run one kind of debut anyway. And it costs $5. Don't worry though, it used to cost $17. Yeah, in Set 1, Ordinary PC was only printed in the booster packs. It was common, but Set 1 actually had disproportionately way more commons than you would expect for the number of common slots in a pack, so it was actually kind of difficult to get specific common cards. The price is down now because it was aggressively reprinted in almost every start deck after that. Sorry, Okayu. The same cannot be said for Stone Axe, which still sits at a pretty $9. This card buffs your power by 20, but every time you attack, you take 10 damage. Sounds underwhelming, but it's actually kind of difficult to get a static plus 20 like that. There's many ways to get a static plus 10, but stacking them is difficult and usually not worth the resources. And this one isn't as commonly used as a lot of the others I'll talk about, but it comes up a lot. Helps you get past certain thresholds depending on the deck. You may have noticed that there's an extra effect on this card. Yeah, it's technically an Aki card, but Aki is unfortunately very undertuned right now, so that is not why you see it used. Explosion Magic, which just straight deals 20 to the opponent's center or collab holomem, is used for similar reasons, even though it's technically a Shion card. Going back a little, there are more PCs than just ordinary PC. Like how Pokemon has various Pokeballs, Hololive has various PCs. Luna even has an Oshi skill that tutors them. The main ones we'll see around, besides ordinary, are Amazing PC, which archives a cheer on stage to look for a non-buzz first or second bloom from the deck. Custom PC, which swaps a debut in hand with a similarly named first bloom from the deck. Retro PC, which returns a holomem from the archive. And Gorgeous PC, which spends a holo power to tutor a first bloom, even buzz, from your deck with the same color as your Oshi. These are rarely used at more than 1 or 2 copies, and the specific ones you use depend on what your deck is trying to do. Like, only buzz-centric decks that aren't that concerned about their holo power even consider running Gorgeous PC. I'm not sure how to segue in or out of it, but Penlight spends a holo power to ramp a cheer. You don't see it as often because you don't want to be spending your holo power willy-nilly, but it shows up occasionally in decks that just need a little bit more ramp. I've said a fair bit of like Pokemon thus far, but one place that Hololive is very much not like Pokemon is when it comes to draw power. Pokemon always has a new draw 3 supporter, functionally identical to a limited support card. And it's always awful because there's just way better things to be doing with your supporter for the turn, even and especially if you're trying to draw cards. I think it's the same thing for shuffle your hand to the deck and draw 5, but I don't play Pokemon, I'm not sure. But in Hololive, Harusaki Nodoka and Mane-chan are 3 to 4 copy staples in nearly every deck. They were later joined by the stranger Mikorone24, which... Okay, so you roll a die. On a 1, it's a draw 2. On 2 or 4, it's a draw 3, and otherwise it's a draw 2 and tutor a debut. Sometimes it's a Nodoka, sometimes it's strictly worse, sometimes it's a combination ordinary PC. I don't think this would be very widely used if we had more consistent options. It's personal preference what you use over what, but it's really just about getting enough draw power. It's common to see decks with high counts of all 3. Oh, but you want to talk bad draw power that still gets used because we don't got much better? Then we gotta talk gravities. Gravity is a community term for a certain class of cards named after First Gravity, the second Gravity revealed. First Gravity is a limited support card from the Soraz start deck with the following text. This card can only be played if you have 6 or fewer cards in your hand, excluding this card. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal any number of them that are holomem named Tokino Sora or Ozki, and put them into your hand. Then put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. For comparison, we can look at the limited support Promise. With the text, this card can only be played if you have 6 or fewer cards in your hand, excluding this card. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal any number of them that are holomem with Promise, and put them into your hand. Then put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. And there are many, many more cards like this. They all have that same restriction and the exact same effect with the exact same numbers, only switching out what property the holomem are being checked for. Some, like First Gravity, have a list of names that they check against, and some have a tag that they search for. The first one actually revealed was Idle Mic, which searches for singing holomem, but Gravity's the better name, so we call them Gravities. There are also cards that are like Gravities without being the exact same effect. They all look at the top few cards of the deck, reveal something there, and put the rest on the bottom in any order. But they might only reveal one thing, or reveal 2 different specific things, or not even look for holomem, or look at more cards, etc. Most notable is Sub PC, which searches the top 5 cards for 1 limited support. The basic gist is the same, but they're not the same with the exact same effects and numbers with just the property you're searching for swapped out. It's a matter of personal opinion if you also call these cards gravities or not, but usually when someone talks about gravities, they mean the ones that are exactly the same. You also might hear top 4, like this is the singing top 4, if the speaker wishes to avoid insider lingo, which is fair. Are gravities good? Well, they're not great draw power. Sure, they can theoretically be basically a draw 4, but this is startlingly unlikely. How unlikely? Well, suggest using a gravity as draw power over Notica anywhere, and P-Tactician will find you, and he will show you this picture. And he'll be right too. This is a hypergeometric distribution, which tells you the probability of getting different amounts of desired cards by randomly drawing some number of cards from a deck. And you can use this to see that in order for a gravity to get 3 or more cards on average, being Notica or better, you need at least 31 Holomem with the desired property in your deck. So, not very feasible in terms of draw power. And yes, that calculation is assuming that the only card not in the deck is the gravity you're using, which is impossible. Trying to calculating averages with all of that involves accounting for so many variables it's not even funny. The actual numbers are probably a little different, but it's a perfectly fine approximation. But that isn't the end of the conversation. After all, some decks do run that many Holomem sharing a targetable property. I would think that a card being only, on average, a Notica or better is not comforting, but it is better on average. There's also the concerns about getting cards in hand that aren't Holomem. A Notica has the potential of grabbing any kind of card, not just Holomem. In a desperate situation, I think I'd always prefer Notica over a gravity. But that's assuming they're mutually exclusive. You could easily have 4 Notica and then run some gravities for a bit of extra draw power. I think that including Mane-chan and Mikorone, you don't really need that much draw power, but there's an argument. Also, the remaining cards going back to the bottom in any order, even cards you could grab but chose not to, is a valuable tool in decks that want to stack their deck for some reason. I'll talk more about Chloe in a bit, but that deck runs multiple gravities for this exact reason. Gravities have their place in the game. They're not awful, but they can be a real beginner's trap, especially since they just keep printing them! There are so many of these! Every start deck and nearly every tag has their own gravity, plus some bonus ones just for fun. Pakura and Muna don't even have any synergy. Fubuki has like 4 that can grab her. It's insane! Like many TCGs, the first set of Hololive was wildly unbalanced. A lot of decks were undertuned, and a few decks just peeled ahead of the rest. I don't want to undermine the viability and impact of the later sets, but most of the top decks right now are set 1 decks that have just integrated some of the new stuff into them. No cards have been banned yet, but a few cards have been restricted to 1 copy, almost all of them from set 1. So, in no particular order, here is a non-exhaustive list of some pretty good decks you have to watch out for. The general gist of what these decks do, I'm aware of from just sort of being in the community talking about them, but for specific analysis, I have extensively referred to Chocolatte's Google Doc on the topic, which has a lot more information about a bunch of different decks. Kiara is one of the top decks right now, but this wasn't always the case. She was in set 1, and her whole thing is archiving a bunch of cards and drawing cards along the way. The payoff is her second bloom that deals 80 damage plus 10 more for every Holomem in the archive, with no cap. This scales to some crazy damage and has been in the game since set 1. So why wasn't it good before? Well, let's finish reading that attack, shall we? It shuffles 6 Holomem from the archive back into the deck. If you don't have that many Holomem, it just shuffles all of them back into the deck. Yeah, you put in all that work to buff up the second Bloom's attack, and it just undoes like half of that along the way. Kiara can archive a lot of cards real fast, but she couldn't keep up with that pace. So for the first two sets, Kiara on her own wasn't really a deck people did. If you see data from the time showing the Kiara Oshi in use, that's almost certainly a Polka deck. More on her later. So what changed? Well, set 3 introduced a new support for Kiara. It's a first bloom that archives 1 to 4 Takanachi Kiaras from the deck. And just like that, she's on top of the world. And yeah, that's the story. She usually gets some help from Chloe or Iraha, but more on them later. Also of note are her Oshi card, which can kind of negate a red Holomem being downed, and her mascot Kotori, who reduces all incoming damage by 10. And that's the generic effect, so you see it pop up in a whole bunch of other decks. This is the extent of my Suisei merch? Really? I gotta get on that. Anyway, Suisei is all about dealing absurd amounts of damage to the backstage. She is explosive, and I distinctly recall losing a game out of nowhere to her. She has a bunch of ways to deal random bits of damage to the backstage. Her Oshi skill can add 50 on top of any of that. Her SP Oshi skill can copy damage to the front to the back. And she has a first bloom that just straight up downs a back Holomem who's taken any damage. You don't lose any life, but still. But the cream of the crop is her second bloom with the following attack. For 4 cheer, you deal 60 damage, but if you archive 2 cheer, yeah, this attack is very cheer hungry. Then you do an extra 60 damage for every Holomem stacked underneath her, and can target any back Holomem with the attack. Yes, it's weirdly phrased. You do need to archive the cheer to be able to target the back. This is known, it's just phrased weirdly. Suisei has been one of the best non-broken decks since set 1, and now that the really broken stuff has been phased out, she's standing tall. She's cheer hungry and is slow to get started, so she needs like some ramp or protection along the way, but there are plenty of options for a second Holomem to do just that. I've been talking up set 1 a lot, for good reason, but there are plenty of good, viable decks from the later sets. Most notably is Reine. This isn't much better. Her whole thing is having effects, usually damage, that scale based on the number of different colors of cheer on the stage. Most notably, once again, is her second bloom, with an attack that scales damage based on how many different colors of cheer are attached to her. Are you noticing a pattern? Anyway, one notable feature about Reine is that she's very versatile with what Oshi she uses. There is a Reine Oshi, and it does good things for the deck, but it doesn't do enough. Specifically, it struggles with recovering once one of your really set up Holomem gets downed. As such, Reine decks tend to use some other Oshi that helps fill up that gap, and there are several. Like Ollie, who can bloom from the archive and get some nice draw power going, or Kobo, who can take 5 cheer from the archive and attach them to any of your ID Holomem in any way you like, or Ozki, who can just take all of the cheer in the archive and attach it to Reine. So it can be a little hard to track how well Reine is doing just looking at the data of what Oshis are being used, but she's doing very well. Like Suisei, Reine needs some time to get set up and appreciates having some extra ramp, though she has some nice tools herself, and often runs a second member to help her out. She's also the only deck not from set 1 to get a card restricted. Her mascot Tatong got restricted to 1 copy. I didn't mention Tatong because it's not really vital to her game plan. It just buffs damage and health, but it is very overtuned at doing that. It provides 30 extra HP, a number only matched by Iraha's mascot. Keep in mind that Iraha's whole thing is being defensive, and that mascot only buffs HP, not damage. So yeah, Tatong was a bit too much. Getting the mascot restricted wasn't any kind of crippling blow to the deck, but it does slow her down. Getting warmer Polka isn't as good as the other decks I'm going to talk about. She's sort of a long-standing rogue deck, but it's interesting, so I'm going to talk about it. Polka is very different from the rest of the decks we've been talking about because she has a Buzz First Bloom with an attack that scales crazy damage. I promise not all the decks are like this. The big two I've been holding off on aren't like this at all. This is just a good formula for a consistent deck. But yes, the Polka deck is centered around her Buzz First Bloom with an attack that scales based on the number of fans on your stage, and her fan Zain, who acts as a red cheer when attached to Polka, but has the drawback that you take an extra 10 damage from all incoming sources. The secret sauce here is to note that it doesn't just count fans attached to that Holomem, or even just Zain. So, Polka decks tend to run other members who have their own fans to be attached. This can take the form of either just running a couple of debuts as just somewhere to put fans, or as a full-blown collaboration with another fan-centric member. In sets 1 and 2, this was Kiara with her KFP fans, but since set 3, it's been Miko with her Miko P fans, who act a lot like Zain, in that they count as red cheer while attached, with a downside. Miko's a pretty competent fan deck by herself, too. I think she's currently actually faring better than Polka. Her second Bloom's attack only scales based on Miko P's attached to that Holomem, so it's a little bit worse than Polka in that regard, but the damage starts at 120 instead of 50, and her effect can add another 50 on top of that. Also, Hiroshi can recycle Miko P's and get some draw power going. There are many members who don't have full decks of their own, but act as supplementary members for other decks. Most notable are the Rampers. Muna has a First Bloom that sends a blue or green cheer to anyone. Eofi has a First Bloom that sends the top card of the cheer deck to any non-Eofi ID Holomem. And Chloe has a First Bloom that looks at the top 3 cards of the cheer deck and sends one of them to any Holomem. Chloe is a very strong generic ramper that can get thrown into any deck, but she only came out in set 2. Before that, Muna worked very well in Suisse, and the only practical difference between Muna and Chloe in a full blue cheer deck is that Chloe has slightly better stats. And Eofi's secret weapon is a second bloom that can deal some decent damage and recycles cheer for Rene. Also worth noting is that Chloe, especially with Louis, is a real deck, centered around her second bloom that gambles. Like, that's the flavor. It reveals the top 3 cards of the deck, and then deals 100 damage plus 20 for every Holomem amongst those cards. And then, if all 3 of those cards are Holomem with the same bloom level, it does an extra bit of life damage, even if it doesn't knock out the opposing Holomem. This is made into a real deck by rigging the machine. These decks run like 20 debuts to maximize their chances of hitting that jackpot, and run a lot of gravity and gravity-like cards to just stack the order of the deck. Supplementary members don't just have to ramp, they can also provide protection. Ireha has a First Bloom that redirects all attacks to it while in the collab position. Not technically a redirect, but the difference is niche. And Zeta has a Buzz First Bloom that can just negate damage once per turn on a coin flip. There are also Oshis that are generic enough that any deck can consider running them. Sora has a very cheap Oshi skill that moves a cheer around, and a pretty cheap SP skill that is an enemy and a damage buff for your center Holomem if they're white. Any deck that doesn't have a purpose-built Oshi should at least consider running her. Ollie's an interesting case because her Oshi skill is highly non-generic. It blooms in ID Gen 2 from the archive. But her SP Oshi skill blooms anyone from the archive and draws 4 archives 2 before then. So, many decks will run Ollie just for that SP skill. Conversely, Pecora's SP skill that treats every die roll as a 6 is less useful outside of Pecora than you might expect, but her Oshi skill that moves all green cheer on a downed Holomem to anyone else as you like is so good that a lot of decks that don't need green cheer will run a bunch of green cheer so that they can use Pecora Oshi and take advantage of that Oshi skill. Most decks have a lot have colorless cheer requirements after all. Now that's more like it. Let's get to the big ones. Promise has this really interesting gimmick where they have some really good card effects. Hollow power fixing, some of the best tutoring in the game with the ability to do some deck thinning, the best color fixing in the game to this day, and the single most overtuned card in the game to this day. But these effects only work on other Promise cards. Fuck! But yeah, Mume is the core of the Promise deck with her draw power and ability to search for other Promise members. Especially her Idle First Bloom that can search any Promise debut or First Bloom, including herself. Crony's Idle First Bloom searches for any color cheer you need and attaches it to anyone you want. And her Second Bloom isn't used as much because the Idle First Bloom is just so good you don't want to stop being able to do that. But her Second Bloom has the two insane effects to bloom a debut you played that turn and unbloom your opponent's Hollow Mem. Wild. IRyS did some hollow power fixing, but she was mostly there to bring the damage. Her Second Bloom has an attack that scales damage based on how many Promise Hollow Mem are on your stage, but more notable was her Idle First Bloom, which has the effect on bloom your center and collab Hollow Mem with Promise get plus 30 damage to their attacks. Note that IRyS herself does not need to be in either position, and that it stacks. If you bloom one IRyS in the backstage, you are doing an extra 60 damage out of nowhere. If you put down two, you're doing an extra 120 damage out of nowhere. You're running 4. Also, she does still count herself, so some non-Promise decks were running her as an early attacker to get 70 damage for basically free. Fun fact, this card is actually why we have a restricted list in the first place. It wasn't good. The very first restricted list obviously had IRyS, but it also had Idle Mume. Oh, they want Promise dead. And like it worked. We immediately became a lot more excited for the set 2 reveals that were happening around that time, instead of just going, well, it doesn't beat Promise. Promise kind of fell off the map after that. You sort of really couldn't use it. Like, it really wasn't a deck without Idle Mume. But Idle Mume was unrestricted in the second restriction list. Only unrestricted thus far. And yeah, it's usable again. Not great, not great. Promise is in this strange situation where, yes, they had the best source of early to mid-game damage in the entire game, but IRyS was kind of their only source of early to mid-game damage. So they're struggling without her. And unlike Suisei and Reine, they don't have the space to throw in another Hollow Mem to make up for that. They're already running 3 members. They cannot handle a 4th who is not Promise. The Promise lock is real. It just wasn't a big deal before. Also, Bae was there. She had some benefits. She did some, burn damage, but not, a lot. She had the ability to get Hollow Mem out of the archive, which was difficult in set 1. And her Second Bloom has, I think, the only hand disruption in the entire game. It's just not very good hand disruption. Does things, but again, Promise was already running 3 members. They didn't have the space for a 4th. That's not, doing a whole lot for the deck. Fauna, unfortunately, did not get any cards. I'm learning a lot about my merch habits as I'm filming this. Kanata is Hololive's premier aggro deck, and performs as such. Her unlimited debut does 40 damage for 1 colorless cheer, which is phenomenal. It's a number that's only been matched by attacks with 2 cheer and only surpassed by attacks with 3 cheer. 40 on a debut is really good. As such, though, has a drawback where she can only attack the center Hollow Mem, though this isn't as relevant as you might think. It comes up, but it's not a huge drawback. Her other debut has a collab effect that buffs the center by 30, pretty significant in the early game. She has a First Bloom that pings the center for 30, and another First Bloom that can tutor for a mascot on Bloom. Her mascot Upao buffs damage by 10 and can do some retributive damage as well. Combine these with other aggressive cards like Axe or Explosion Magic, and you got yourself a pretty solid deck right there. But we're not done. Her second bloom has a collab effect that pings the center for 50, which is good, but more importantly, her attack does 100 damage, and if it overkills by 50, so like if the opposing Hololive has like 40 HP left, then it does an extra life damage. So that's good. Let's temper our expectations. I mean, you gotta get them to 50 or lower without killing them. And that can be difficult. Sure, you've got like all these different like damage buffs that raise that threshold higher and higher. It's good. Obviously it's good. But like, you do have to work for it. You do have to get them in the proper damage range. What does Hiroshi do? Hiroshi skill costs 3 holo power to set the opponent's center holomem to 50 HP. Oh no. That's not even the SP skill. She can do that as much as she can afford the holo power. Her SP skill buffs damage by 100, which is good, but not nearly as exciting. But yeah, that combo is insane, and that is, again, on top of the really strong aggro core we just talked about. Kanata only being the second best deck in set 1 is really just evidence for Promise, and specifically IRyS, being absolutely cracked. But she was second best. So the first restriction list only hit her collab debut. That might not seem like much, but it's like restricting to Tong for Reine. It's not a core part of the deck, but it is overtuned. 30 damage is a lot, especially in the early game. So it slows them down without being a serious hindrance. And it was not enough. That one's a little misleading because of the small sample size. This one's more accurate, and you can see that the Reine hit was also necessary. But, I mean, no, it was everywhere. It was the deck you ran if you wanted to win. Kanata was crazy. The devs went right for the head, restricting her second bloom to 1 copy, apologizing for basically killing the deck on the spot, and promising to print more support for Kanata in the future so that you can still make a viable deck with her. She's still top 3! How? I know how. The Oshi's bonkers. I kinda skimmed over it, but this is insane. There's an argument to be made if the second bloom would still be good without the guarantee overkill button, but I know the Oshi's good without the second bloom because non-Kanata decks run that all the time. You can't block it because it doesn't deal damage so they get down to 50. It sets their remaining HP to 50. So all of your damage reducers, all of your Buzz Zetas don't work. They don't work. The only counterplay are cards printed later, specifically worded so that they will counter this exact effect. It's real good for any deck to be able to invalidate tankier Holomem. I'm not saying that Kanata Oshi is the sole reason Buzz decks aren't doing any better, and they are doing pretty well, but I am saying it's the top reason. On the first restriction list, the devs said that they were looking at Kanata Oshi, which was a wild thing to see because you can't restrict an Oshi, you have to ban it. And they don't want to ban cards. Fair. But they said nothing of the sort on the second restriction list. I assume that they really did believe they were killing the Kanata deck. To clarify before we begin, I will be talking about bad cards and decks because I think they are interesting from a mechanical and gameplay perspective. I do not mean any of what I'm about to say as a critique of the game itself or its developers. Also, I will be very careful with how I phrase these critiques, and I advise you to do the same. Because if you just sort of use the language you're used to using, we're talking about like any other TCG, you can find yourself saying some things that sound very bad out of context. For example, Okayu is a worse Suisei is a pretty true statement in the context of the Hololive official card game right now. See what the issue is? I'm gonna be very careful to phrase everything I say as a critique of the cards and decks. One last warning before we go ahead. If your Oshi isn't doing so hot right now, please be normal about it. The devs did not intentionally shaft any members, and they will certainly print support for any active members in the future. Also, you can play bad decks. No one's made it illegal yet! A lot of bad decks right now are more so undertuned than fundamentally flawed. Basically every blue deck except Suisei, and I guess Chloe, just doesn't do enough damage to do what Suisei does. Some of the decks like Kobo aren't trying to do exactly what Suisei does, they're more so doing a little bit of damage to everyone to get easier knockouts later. They just need to do a little more little bit of damage for that to really work. Some decks do have some more fundamental issues with them, though. Aki, and to a lesser extent Choco, have decks centered around healing their own Holomem. Just TCG-wide, stuff like that isn't very good. It's an effect type focused on not losing instead of winning. It just isn't that viable unless it does something absolutely insane. So I don't really think these decks could ever be top strategies the way that they are right now, but they could absolutely be competent decks. They're just also very undertuned. How much health do you think Aki heals? Well, her SP Oshi skill is a full heal, which is as good as a heal can get, but that's only once per game. Her Holomem heal 20, but her second bloom heals 40 once. She has a mascot that heals you every time you attack. It heals you 10. And really it heals 0 because you use it in conjunction with Stone Axe, which remember is an Aki card, so that you draw a card every time you attack and take no damage from Stone Axe, which is a good combo, but it doesn't make a deck on its own. And that appears to be replaced nowadays with her new Buzz that heals a lot of Holomem every time you attack. Guess the number. Yeah, it's 10. Choco also heals 20 at a time, but she's doing other things as well. The real tragedy with Choco is YuYuTei and Q&A 285. Choco's YuYuTei is a card that heals 20 and buffs that Holomem's damage by 20 if you have a Holomem with the cooking tag somewhere on your stage. Doesn't even have to be the same Holomem. On a non-limited event that Choco can search and recycle pretty easily. That sounds pretty damn good. Sounds like you could build a deck around that for sure. And then Q&A 285 came out and specified that the Holomem that's targeted cannot have full health. Your Holomem must be damaged in order to get the buff, which just seriously kills your momentum. There was a card from set 3 that actually had a fair bit of hype going for before it was even revealed. We got to see the art and name of Fan Meeting before it ever got revealed, and on top of the art just being really good, it clearly had something to do with fans. A generic searcher perhaps? Polka buff? No, keep showing the messages. There were a lot. And then it finally got revealed, and it was a generic fan searcher. Search for any fan from the deck and add it to your hand. That sounds great!
It's limited.
The fallout was... I mean, they weren't mad. Just disappointed. If you're unsure what the issue is, it's just straight up opportunity cost. You can only play one limited card per turn, and there's just way better options. All of your draw power, most of your searching, most of your support card aggro, it's just way too valuable a resource to be spending on a single fan. Maybe two, but that's not the reality we live in. Set 4 introduced Mascot Catcher, which is fan meeting but for mascots. We just swapped out the word fan with mascot. It's exactly the same card. The response was as expected. But if we're talking bad cards, we have to talk about Spot Holomem. If you had asked me just a few months ago, I would have called Spot Holomem a failed mechanic of the Hololive official card game. There were not any in Set 3 and its respective start decks, and there was speculation that the English release would do away with them entirely. So what's the issue with spots? Let's start with what a spot is. It's a bloom level completely separate from the standard debut first-second line. They have no color and cannot bloom. If you're familiar with Pokemon, you probably just thought about a whole slew of strong basic Pokemon. Unfortunately, that's not what spots have been in this game. They've really been debuts that just can't bloom into stronger Holomem. Worse still, they've been effect debuts, usually collab effects, with the awful stat lines to match, that can't bloom into stronger Holomem. They're not good. They can occasionally work. Looking at Chocolat's Google Doc, there are plenty of random spots that he suggests as a tech in various decks. Like, there's probably better options, but they can get the job done. There are only two that rise to the level of actually being recommended as standard in a deck. Spot Null attaches a cheer from the archive, and yeah, it's used in some decks that could use the helping and spare the spot. Used to be in Suisei, but I think that turned out to not be good. Nowadays Marine has a few just in case. More notably, though it's not really used anymore, is Spot Pecora, who searches for a Buzz Holomem on a coin flip. For the first two sets, this was the only generic way to search for a Buzz, and so it got used in decks that wanted their Buzzes early and didn't have some more specific way of getting it. Most notably in Polka, because set 1 had Nosagis, which were the Pecora fan. So this spot could search the ever-important Buzz and double as a place to put fans. Also, Nosagi's effect let you archive it to re-roll that Buzz search die. So those were actually marginally helpful in the deck. That is the best success story of any spot in the history of the game. Set 3 introduced Gorgeous PC, which can tutor most first blooms, including Buzzes. Yes, you have to archive a holo power, but if you were seriously considering running Spot Pecora, that's well worth the price of admission. So no one uses Spot Pecora anymore. Wrapping back to the start, why don't I say that Spot Holomem are a failed mechanic anymore? Because Set 4 introduced Spot Liz and Gigi, and they prove that they're still making them, so we can't call it quite yet. They're fine. They have actually decent HP stats and effects reflecting a more defensive playstyle. Liz protects a debut in the center, which isn't nothing. And Gigi ramps a cheer when downed. And let's talk about that one, because it's interesting. She also has no baton pass cost. So the idea is pretty clear. You put Gigi in the center while you develop your Holomem in the back. If she gets downed, you get an extra cheer, and if she doesn't, you can switch her out without losing any resources. For that to work ideally, you'd probably have to get her in your opening hand, and running a lot of her probably isn't ever worth it. But it's a good, interesting idea. Minor problem. You can't start the game with a spot in the center. It has to be a debut. So to set this up turn 1, you have to either be running a deck where the debuts also don't have a baton pass cost, or spend a resource to get Gigi up in the center as soon as possible, which kinda goes against the whole idea. Now there could be decks that appreciate this. There are decks that don't really have baton pass costs, and there are decks that might like having some cheer in the archive. It's not impossible to make use of her, but it's way more of a hassle than if she were just a debut that didn't have anything she could bloom into. Speaking of, that's another fundamental issue with spots. They don't count as debuts for the mulligan rule. You know, the awful mulligan rule that heavily penalizes having too few debuts. Yeah, that might be a problem. There are plenty of decks that will run debuts they never intend to bloom, but spots cannot easily fit that same niche because of the mulligan rule. So if you still want a good number of debuts for mulligan purposes, the slots that these spot cards are taking over cannot be the debut slots. And now you have just way too many cards at a debut power level in your deck. Outside of the few sort of niche scenarios that I've mentioned, spots just really aren't worth it. There are several contenders for the worst spot card, like this spot Kanata from the Sora's start deck that requires a white and green cheer to use her only attack, the only spot with non-colorless cheer requirements. But I have my favorite, and I do mean favorites. I'm not mad, I'm not disappointed, I'm smiling ear to ear thinking about this baffling bit of cardboard. My bet for the worst card in the game right now is Spot Kali. 70 HP isn't good, but it could be worse. 30 damage for one colorless cheer is actually pretty decent, but that's not why you're running this card. We need to talk about this collab effect. On collab, you shuffle 1 to 3 cheer from your archive into your cheer deck. Why? Why would you ever want to do that? You don't even get the cheer, it just goes into the cheer deck. It's easier to get cheer out of there than the archive, but why do this extra step? If you're just pulling off the top, it shuffles. You gotta be like running out of cheer for that to be warranted. It happens, but I don't think any deck does it enough and then needs more cheer for that to be warranted. If you're searching for a specific color, then you need to be running a multicolored deck where you run a real chance of running out of an important color. Why? Change your ratios, but more importantly, and this is a general thing I guess, if you're that concerned about having a bunch of cheer in your archive that you need to get back, you should probably use an Oshi that can get back a bunch of cheer from the archive, or that stops it from getting there in the first place. So I don't think any deck, even like nichely, wants this effect. But if it happened, Encore, non-limited event with the exact same text, and no one uses it! The Hololive card game has had several promo cards thus far. There are promos for events, albums, games, packed into boxes for other TCGs, etc. By and large, these are alternate arts for cards you can get normally. If you bought Okayu's new album, you got a version of her standard unlimited debut, but with the album art instead of the normal art. This makes sense. We don't want actually useful cards to be locked behind a limited time purchase. But there are exceptions. Most notable are the birthday Oshis. If you've been following the Hololive birthday streams, you've probably seen one of these. For close to a year now, every birthday merch drop has included an Oshi card specific to that set as a bonus for purchasing the complete set. For many members, this is how we found out what color they are in the game. And also how we've determined that Hollow Stars is not included in the scope of the game, at least right now. Oga had a joke Oshi card, and the only reason it's not playable in Delta right now is because you just cannot parse infinite life in terms of the rules of the game. Anyway, these are cards with no equivalent in any normally purchasable product, but the developers thought about that. Any two birthday Oshis of the same color have the exact same stats and skills. Their Oshi skill buffs the attack of an appropriately colored holomem by 20, and their SP skill tutors for a holomem of the appropriate color. It helps that the effects aren't very good. Thus, once enough birthday Oshis of each color has been released, if they ever become good, there should be enough supply of them that you can pretty easily get your hands on one. Currently, prices are at around $90 per, with these two being more expensive because they were less available. But those prices would only go up if they actually became good. But, we are still, light on them because it takes half a year for the merch to ship. There's been a lot announced, but they're not all in people's hands yet. Also, despite it being the whole point, the cards aren't identical because they don't have the same name. And there are effects in the game that care about the name of your Oshi. For example, this Botan card checks if your Oshi is named Shishiro Botan or not. So it would work with the Botan birthday Oshi, but not the Reine birthday Oshi, even though they're supposed to be identical. I'm overstating these concerns a bit. These effects aren't very great, so if it becomes good, is doing a hell of a lot of work in that hypothetical. I have confidence that even if that somehow happened, the devs would do something about it. They're not just gonna let that go on. It's fun to think about, though. But the birthday Oshis are not the only unique promo cards. There are 2 cards with the set code HPR for promo. These were both album promo cards, and they were the first 2 album promos. I think they quickly realized that they shouldn't have unique promos. The first was a Spot Miko card that came with her Flower Rhapsody album. Yep, a Spot with 50 HP and a 10 damage vanilla attack, and a collab effect to sometimes search a red or blue cheer. Okay, we're probably fine. Any deck that might want that effect has way better ramp available. And in set 2, there was a whole little group of spot cards for all the Hollow Witches, including Magical Girl Miko with 60 HP, a vanilla 20 damage attack, and an exactly identical collab effect. Okay, so the devs knew it might be an issue and just printed a strictly better version in the booster pack. Fair. But it's not strictly better because Magical Girl Miko is named Magical Girl Miko, not Sakura Miko, and does not have an effect that says that its name is also Sakura Miko. So, any effect looking for a holomem named Sakura Miko will not work on Magical Girl Miko. There aren't a lot of effects that do that, but most importantly, it means you can't attach Miko P to Magical Girl Miko. And again, Miko P is a core element of the Miko deck, so that's kind of a big deal. If, and this is a big if, but if the Miko deck ever, really wanted that sometimes searching a red or blue cheer effect, it might be better to run the promo Miko, because then you could attach Miko P to it for the rest of your shenanigans. But again, that's never happening. Also, the promo Miko is the only Miko card with the singing tag, which is actually a pretty relevant tag. Again, not relevant enough for this card to be any good. I don't have the second card. It was a promo for Regloss's first album called Regloss, and it was a Regloss Gravity. First of all, that was released well before any Regloss members were in the game, so it just didn't do anything for a long period of time. But second of all, that's, important. It was also available with an alternate art at, a public recording of a radio show. Not too sure what this was, but also definitely not an accessible venue. And the devs seem to realize this too, so when my script says it's the Kanata start deck. That's not true. It's the Hajime start deck. I'm sorry, Hajime. When the Hajime start deck came around, introducing Regloss members to the game, it contained a reprint of the promo card. Just a promo numbered card in a start deck. And it's using the radio art. Okay, I understand, retroactively making the original printing in alternate art for an album to line up with the other album promos. But the point of this card is that it's supposed to represent just Regloss, the gen as a whole. But they don't do radio shows that often. That's not, a core part of their character. So that's just, why wouldn't you just make a third art for it? That baffles me. That gets me. But those are the promos.
Not sure of much, but know already.
So where can you get these cards? Well, everything gets sold on the Hololive official shop, but it tends to sell out really fast, like a couple hours, and you are limited to purchasing 2 boxes at a time, which is both really inconvenient and means you'll be getting loose boxes instead of sealed cases if you're trying to buy on that scale. For Japanese cards, I tend to use CardShop Japan, whom I've never had any trouble with and will let you purchase any quantity you like. But they only have singles for set 1, not any of the later sets. The only place I know of to get singles from set 2 onwards is YuYuTei, which is the reference most people use to talk about the price of a card. But I have never used them because they haven't had international shipping. I've heard that they very recently added international shipping, but I have not had a chance to try that out and see how it works. For the English release, though, I hate to say it, but your best bet is probably TCGPlayer. I got my stuff from Gold Star Collectibles, and they have pre-orders available way early at reasonable prices. I had a very frustrating time actually getting my package. It took an extra 3 weeks to get here, and while like 98% of that wasn't their fault, I'm still hesitant to try that again. For further information, you can check out the Discord server and the resource links channel on there. It has OG Spreadsheet, which is the most up-to-date source of information on just all of the cards. And it also has a quick play manual and all of the developer Q&As translated. The resource links channel also has the translated comprehensive rules. We still don't have official English rules yet. Chocolat's Google Doc of all the different decks. English Proxies by Liam of Weiss and Chill and Ashi. Speaking of Liam, his channel has a lot of quality videos on the topic, and I won't be making any more, so go check him out. He has a lot more information on past events and whatnot, and will continue to have more information in the future. There are many channels known for showing off gameplay of the Hololive OCG. I don't know a lot about that, though. I'm gonna throw a few up on screen, and I might miss somebody important. Sorry. And speaking of gameplay videos, I of course have to mention the official gameplay videos. One of Laplace vs. Polka, and one of Watame vs. Sora. Though don't mistake the video being official for it being completely correct in how the game is played. I know for a fact that in Watame vs. Sora, they interpret second Sora's art effect in a way that is just explicitly wrong, like there's a Q&A for it, and there's probably more that I just didn't notice. As for actually playing the game, the first step you should always consider is local game stores. Though, I have to admit I don't know a whole lot about this. There is a page on Bushiroad's website to find stores near you playing the game, in either Japanese or English, and you should never overlook the option of building a player base at your own store. But if that's not really a viable option for you, or if you just want to play more, then, once again, you can check out the Discord. There is a Looking for Games channel and various call tags to help you find opponents. You can play physically over webcam, or you can use one of the several fan sims. As far as I'm aware, the most commonly used simulator is my own HoloDelta. I promise I would tell you if it wasn't. It's a manual sim, which is not ideal, but it has all of the cards and alt arts for you to play around with. It even has a toggle on the main menu to restrict yourself to only playing with and against English cards to avoid getting spoiled. There are many people who helped HoloDelta become what it is today. To keep things brief, I will put them up on the screen. There are a couple of tabletop sim mods. I think the main two are by Noodle Brain and Cream Puff, but that's not something I know a lot about. There are a few solo play Japanese sims that I couldn't get working for the sake of showing you footage. And I absolutely have to mention HoloDuel, which is the only automatic sim I'm aware of. But it stopped getting updated in the middle of set 2. Never say never. I think someone on the Korean side is trying to revive it, but it's not up to date. Hey, quickly jumping in from the edit here. After recording this, I went to go get some footage of Holoduel in action, and it turns out the creator shut down the server because not enough people were using it. I'm keeping this in here because, again, I'm pretty sure someone on the Korean side of things is trying to revive it, but I don't know much about that either. I've also got to step away from Delta sooner rather than later, but I want to make sure it can be maintained without me. And there are a few long overdue fixes and features that I won't be happy leaving undone. All links in the description.